It's hard to know if Android will be the same without the Samsung Galaxy S line, by far the most recognizable flagship for more than 12 years. And with the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 inside the S22, it might be in sight of many gamers as an option for a phone that has top performance and offers the best features, like top-tier cameras, support, and updates for much longer than the competition. But with the excessive heat from the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1, the performance result for phones using it is not that simple, and taming it for gaming requires a deep understanding of how it works. So today, we're going to analyze what you can do to get the most out of it for games and emulation. Welcome back. I'm Claudio, and this is Zero to Tech. We already had the opportunity to test the Galaxy S22 Ultra and compare it with the Red Magic 7, where we saw that, without a correct thermal design, it's impossible to extract 100% of the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 performance. When I started testing this Galaxy S22 Plus, after finding big drops in performance, I realized that there is a lot of story to tell, and that this review was not going to be that simple. But let's quickly go through the basics. Like any flagship, the box makes you feel that, for the price, they're trying to scam you, including only the essentials. First, the phone, then a box with a pin to change the SIM, the documents, and a USB-C to USB-C cable. No chargers or additional accessories. The design is very sober, especially in this black hue. In front, the screen with Gorilla Glass Victus Plus. The back almost smooth with the same Gorilla Glass. An aluminum rim without much. The buttons on the right. Below, the bottom speaker, the SIM tray, the USB-C port, and the first microphone. And above, the second microphone and some cuts for the antennas. The screen is AMOLED with 1080 by 2340 pixels, with a variable speed of up to 120 Hz. It supports HDR and has a maximum brightness of 1750 nits. Samsung continues to make the best displays in the industry, with perfect blacks, accurate color, and a color saturation that makes the screen pop. For media consumption, it's simply incredible. It comes with 128 or 256 GB of UFS 3.1 storage, with very good results in the transfer test, with speeds up to 1000 megabits per second. And it has no space for microSD expansion. And all the versions include 8 GB of RAM. Let's see if this affects in games. It has an on-screen fingerprint reader that works perfectly. The battery is 4500 mAh with fast charging up to 45 watts by cable, or 15 watts wireless. Something I really like is that you can limit the fast charging modes and the total charge to only 85%, which will make the battery last longer. It has a stereo sound with the top speaker with a balanced volume. It doesn't include a headphone jack. The USB-C port is 3.2, which means much better transfer speed, but most importantly, that you can connect it to an external monitor with an HDMI adapter or directly via USB-C. In my opinion, the HDMI function should be a must in every phone. Software-wise, it comes with Android 12 and with Samsung One UI 4.1, and Samsung is committed to 4 years of Android updates and 5 years of security updates, which is very important nowadays. Finally, the cameras, one of the strongest points of this phone. The main wide with a 50 megapixel sensor. The second one, telephoto with 3x zoom and a 10 megapixel sensor. And the third one, 120 degrees ultra wide with a 12 megapixel sensor. As you can imagine, they're one of the best cameras that you can find on any Android phone, with all the modes you can imagine and video up to 8K. The app includes pro modes, so experts can get the most out of the cameras. Although, I personally still like better the video and photos taken by the iPhone Pro, especially when they use HDR. Let's leave the spec sheet aside, for this is not one of those channels that just show you the phone and read a list of specifications. Here is all about the games, and what options we have to extract the best performance for them. Well, first, let's understand the problem, because a couple of generations ago, phone performance was basically stable, except in very rare cases. But since the Snapdragon 888, Qualcomm seems to be stuck in the same trap as Intel, and offer more performance but at the cost of a very high power consumption and heat. The problem is that modern processors throttle their speed based on temps, as not to melt themselves. Something that sounds healthy, yes, but with the Snapdragon 888 and 8 Gen 1, the increase has been ridiculous, and every manufacturer is suffering trying to control it. So they have only two options. Lower the speed of the processor so that the temps stay within what the phone can dissipate, sacrificing performance in exchange for stability. Or let it go up as far as it can and let it throttle. Keeps a nice performance bump, which looks great in benchmarks but sacrifices stability. And to know what decision every company made is as simple as doing a stress test with 3D Mark. This runs the same test 20 times in a row, recording the execution score. For the S22, the answer is very clear. With a 52% stability, Samsung decided to go for maximum power, sacrificing stability. It is not uncommon. Most non-gamer phones will take this route. The highest score is around 2400 points, but we have a terrible drop and the lowest is within 1200, which gives us the 52%. Just for reference, we also have the results for previous Snapdragon generations, and once hot, the scores are barely better than the older ones. But at least, those were very stable. And to see what that looks like in games, we tried Fortnite, and the result is quite clear. We start around 30 frames, but at the end of the games, it can barely hold 50 FPS and it's complete chaos. Playing is almost impossible. It literally goes from a nice game to a torture trying to survive. More because of the phone than the game itself. And although the easy solution is don't buy a Galaxy and buy yourself a gamer phone, being one of the most popular phones, many people want to know how to get the most out of it in games, without any external help like the Gameseer X3 or any other cooler. Which, by the way, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the review of the Black Shark VR30 AP cooler next week. First, let's start with the sad reality. It won't matter what we do, we are restricted by the thermal design of the phone, so it is impossible to fully exploit the CPU on the S22. The idea is at least to be able to control it and to find the balance so you won't throw your phone to the ground at the end of every game. Supposedly, to achieve this, Samsung gives us the Game Boost functionality. It can be found inside the Game Launcher app by clicking the hamburger button and selecting Game Boost. This analyzes all the aspects of the phone while a game is running, like battery, temperature, CPU and GPU, and optimizes the performance based on three profiles: battery saver, standard or performance. It has an additional option which you can find under the Labs button called Alternate Game Performance Management. This supposedly disables Game Boost and lets the game run to its max, in exchange for more temps and battery drain. First, we tried to see how these profiles are reflected in the stress test, and doesn't seem to do anything. Same stability, same results. The thing is that Game Boost doesn't detect 3D Mark as a game. It even tells you. And if Samsung decides that the app is not a game, who knows how will it manage it? But well, let's try a real game. To find out if it is detected, when you start it, it should show a little icon with a gamepad in the corner. Let's try all 4 modes with Genshin Impact. Before each test, we made sure that the phone was cool. Then, we played for 20 minutes in each mode, always with max graphics settings and 60 FPS. At the end, we also take the phone temp. There is an additional option to limit the refresh rate of the screen to 48Hz, but only limits the screen, not the number of frames generated, which is what hits the processor. So we leave it disabled. And yes, I'm a monster, I know, but we did the test using the touchscreen to see how hot it got. With the performance mode, we started with perfect 60 FPS, nice and pretty, and at the 10-minute mark, we were between 30 and 40, that is where it more or less stays, just sometimes going below 30. After 20 minutes, the camera ends up showing a temperature close to 45 degrees. With that, we have a baseline to compare. In a standard mode, we start a game with about 60 FPS. After 6 minutes, we are more or less in the 40 FPS mark, and it continued to go down until, after 15 minutes, it is again stuck at 30 FPS. But the game felt more stable, even in the end, without falling below 30 FPS, and the final temp was almost 42 degrees. Finally, we tried with battery saver, just because maybe giving it less power early on will help the CPU stay cooler and be more stable. But as soon as we start, we see a big difference. It cannot reach 60 FPS. It starts between 40 and 50, and after 6 minutes, it was between 30 and 40. And after 10 minutes, it was stable again around 30 FPS. Something weird is that the temp was a little higher than expected, marking almost 41 degrees. Finally, we tried with the alternate mode, which basically turns off game boost management and let the hardware regulate itself. Again, it started with 60 frames, and after 6 minutes it was more or less in the 50s, and within 10 minutes we were in the 30 again. It went down much faster, and the main surprise was the temp. With 46 degrees, it was uncomfortable to hold the phone with bare hands. Now, what conclusions can we draw from this? First, that the alternate mode does not help at all. It doesn't have any advantage over the performance mode, and it does have a significant jump in temp and power consumption. Second, game boost modes do work, but they do not compensate for the phone's lousy thermal design. No matter which one we used, temps builds up, and after 15 minutes, we always end up with the same average. But what else can we do? If game boost is not enough, we must limit the games. So we went back to Genshin Impact and set it to medium graphics and 30 FPS limit. We tried first in standard mode, and it starts marking 40 frames. I don't know why if it is limited to 30, but more stable. Although at the 20-minute mark, it already dropped to 30. By far the most stable we saw, and the final temp was 43 degrees. And with the same option we tried battery saver, to compare how much different there was. And the truth is that, although in the end it felt a little slower, and sometimes it dropped below 30 FPS, the final temp was only 40 degrees, which I think is a much better option for the performance. This is the truth of the Galaxy S22. A lot of CPU, but impossible to push it. And just to try to balance the results with other games, in Fortnite, there was no way to keep a stable frame rate. Even lowering the quality to medium and the 3D to 50%, with battery saver, the average was close to 30, with fewer drops. But in standard, again the temperatures does its thing, and the game drops to 15 frames, especially in late game. Call of Duty is not such a heavy game, and it can run perfectly at 60 frames all day, with maximum quality and battery saver, although we only tested it in deathmatch. But that is more thanks to the game, which runs on almost any phone and well, than the performance of the Galaxy. But you know, if your thing is Call of Duty, no problem with the S22. Now a quick emulation check. PSP don't expect to go more than 3x after the phone gets hot. Ridiculous because it could run a much higher resolution if it could only hold the temperature a little lower. In 3DS with C-MJ, you're going to have to limit yourself to 1x, and even then with some slowdowns. PlayStation 2, at least in heavier games, forget about multipliers, though at 1x I don't think there is much you cannot run. And in Dolphin, you'll be able to play the easiest game at 2x, maybe 3x, but the heavy ones and the entire Wii catalog will be limited to 1x. In truth, this is sad. One of the main Android flagships tied up by Samsung's lack of thermal design. And there is no doubt that Samsung is to blame. They don't care about gamers. And the worst part is that, once hot, the results are far from what I had in my Poco F2 with a Snapdragon 865, a phone from 2 years ago. All, the minimum scores in 3D Mark, the resolutions, the frame rates, but the F2 at least was more stable. I don't have all the phones to test, but I took the trouble to look for the results of the same test, mainly to compare stability and minimum scores, and the results are not encouraging for Samsung. Realme GT2 Pro, the OnePlus 10 Pro, and the Oppo Find 5X, minimum 1600, 70% stability. Black Shark 5 Pro, 2200 minimum, 88% stability, and all without comparing the Red Magic phones. There isn't much else to say. If you want a phone to game, any other option is better than the Galaxy S22. And if you have seen any other videos where they say that their games run excellent, be sure that they barely tested. I hope you liked the video. Check out the comparison between the S22 Ultra and the Red Magic 7. Maybe there you will find what you are looking for. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And remember, retro games, modern technology, zero to tech.